For your listening pleasure, Airtime of the Geek.
Hello English and radio listeners, and welcome to Airtime of the Geek. It's Monday and it's just gone 1pm GMT. If you're listening live or via our website, if you're catching up on YouTube, then please like and subscribe to our channel and this video. Comments, queries, suggestions, you can email me. It's paulab@ignitionradio.co.uk. You can call the studio on 01642 329 620 or check out my website. It's airtimeofthegeek.xyz. It's January, it's 2017. It's a new year, a new start. This is the year that the movie The Running Man is actually set in. And we're going to be doing a little retrospective on that later in the show. And for this week's top 10, I am counting down my top 10 sequels that are better than the original movie. Now, in most cases, it's not like I don't like the original movie, it's just I happen to prefer the sequel. The sequel is better. The sequel did it best. So we are going to start with number 10, because it's always more fun for me to do it in reverse order. Number 10 is Gremlins. Well, Gremlins 2. The original Gremlins movie came out in 1984. Gremlins 2, the new batch, was released in 1990. And it's not that I don't like the original Gremlins film, it's just I really love the sequel. Lighter in tone than the original, and with more slapstick humour and cameos and a cast of very talented actors. A few years after the incident in Gremlins, Billy and Kate have moved to New York, where they work for media mogul Daniel Clamp. Meanwhile, Gizmo's former owner has just died and he's been captured for genetics, part of the Clamp building. A little while later, someone gets wet, creates a new gremlin species and learns to finally fight back after years of abuse. And while Gizmo and the surviving humans fight back, the gremlins and their evil leader, the Brain Gremlin, are planning to escape when it gets dark. And if they do, New York will experience a new hell. Number 9 is Clerks 2. Now, Clerks was a film made in 1994 by Kevin Smith. It's a fine film for a complete amateur and his friends to have made on a budget created by maxing out 17 different credit cards and shot entirely in black and white. As an indie movie, it was well received and it was entirely watchable, but the sequel is undeniably better. In Clerks 2, in New Jersey, when Dante arrives to open the convenience store, the Quick Stop, for another day of work, he finds the place on fire. Dante and his friend Randall find another job at a fast food restaurant, Moobies, managed by Becky, and work with the Christian employee Elias. Drug dealers Jay and Silent Bob also move their traffic to this new location. Dante is planning a new life in Florida, getting married with his fiancée Emma, while his friend Becky is a woman that does not believe in romantic love. On the eve of Dante's departure to Florida, Randall decides to throw a farewell/bachelor party for his best friend. However, things go wrong and Dante rethinks his future. Number 8 is The Rescuers Down Under. The Rescuers Down Under is not only the best Disney animated sequel out there, it's actually the only legitimately good animated sequel out there. No arguments from anyone. It's really good and it's better than the original. The only other Disney sequel that comes close is Lion King 2, and that has problems. The Rescuers are based on a series of books by Marjorie Sharp. The first movie was released in 1977 and it was about a pair of secret agent mice, Bernard and Bianca, the latter voiced by the late great Zsa Zsa Gabor, who we just lost at the age of 1,000,008. The plot involves the two mice rescuing a little girl held prisoner in a swamp. The sequel, The Rescuers Down Under, was released in 1990. This time it had our two mice heroes rescue a little boy in Australia from a bloodthirsty poacher who is in pursuit of an endangered bird of prey. Now, I think the fact that the series has a really solid form of source material is what helps this be a legitimately good sequel. In fact, it was the first Disney sequel to ever be released. Also, it's an adventure series rather than the typical romance plot of most of the Disney movies, at least the ones involving Disney princesses. So the writers were not trying to figure out what happened after Happily Ever After, or, introduce the adorable snot goblin children of the protagonists of the first film. So they just were able to write a new adventure following the books. This is also possibly why Lion King 2 is the next best Disney sequel, that it was an adventure story, and but it's not a winning formula. There's plenty of other Disney sequels that are absolutely terrible, but more on Disney sequels another day. Number 7 is Look Who's Talking 2. Look Who's Talking 2 was released in 1989. The concept was that the audience could hear the inner thoughts of a baby, and he was voiced by Bruce Willis. Kirstie Alley is a single mother who meets John Travolta, and they begin a relationship with Travolta becoming a father to the baby Mikey. He's not actually his father biologically, but over the course of the film becomes the father figure involved in his life. The film was a really popular family movie. Audiences loved it, and it made a staggering $297 million back from its $7.5 million budget, making it a roaring success. That's nearly $290 million of pure profit. It followed in very quick succession by a sequel in 1990, Look Who's Talking 2. This time the focus was on a younger sister to Mikey, Julie, who was voiced by Roseanne Barr. While not as successful at the box office, it's far better than the original film. Perhaps now because Mikey has someone to interact with, which makes it better. It was nominated, bizarrely, for a few Golden Raspberry Awards, but I think those were awarded by people who don't like fun. And Look Who's Talking 2 is fun, and it's an inoffensive movie. And it was going against other films which are now historically reviled, such as Bonfire of the Vanities, The Godfather 3, Rocky 5. The third sequel in the series, Look Who's Talking Now, featured the family's pet dogs. You know what, it's fine. If you like the first two movies, you'll like the first one, and so will kids. It's a fine movie. It was never setting out to be Gone with the Wind. It's a film about two talking dogs. So, yeah, Look Who's Talking 2. Number 6 is Three Men and a Little Lady. Now, Three Men and a Baby was released in 1987. It was directed by the late, great Leonard Nimoy and starred some of the era's biggest stars, such as Tom Selleck, Steve Guttenberg, and Ted Danson. The plot was simple. Peter, an architect, played by Selleck, Michael, a cartoonist, played by Guttenberg, and Jack, an actor, played by Danson, all live together as bachelors in a huge New York City apartment where they have parties and flings with different women. However, one day a baby is dropped off on the doorstep with a note saying that the baby is the result of a brief affair between Jack and another actress. With Jack away for a few days, Peter and Michael must care for the baby, but in the meantime there's some confusion over a drug package, which is kind of the B-plot in the movie. The three men end up caring for the baby in a team until her mother arrives to reclaim her, but now all completely bonded with baby Mary, they decide to all live together and raise her in a group. This leads to Three Men and a Little Lady. It was released in 1990 with all the cast reprising their roles and baby Mary having grown into a 5-year-old in the space of 3 years. A romance has developed between Peter and Mary's mother Sylvia, but she's become engaged to a snooty upper-class Englishman who intends to ship Mary off to boarding school the second they're married. As we all know, English people are evil. What follows is an adventure to stop the wedding and make sure that Sylvia doesn't make the mistake of marrying the wrong guy. Well, a guy that the other three men in life don't approve of. Almost everyone talks about the first film being very funny, but the main part everyone remembers is the men changing nappies and coordinating bottle feeds and trying to figure out what they're supposed to be doing, having had no preparations made whatsoever. But this is only a small part of the film, whereas the sequel is more consistently funny throughout, and in my opinion, is a much improvement on the original. Comments, queries, suggestions, you can email me. It's paulab@ignitionradio.co.uk. You can also call the studio on 01642 329620. Check out my website, airtimeofthegeek.xyz. You can also get in touch with us via our Facebook page. It's www.facebook.com/ignitionradioofficial. Our Twitter page is @ignitionr, and our Instagram page is @ignition_radio. Continuing with my top 10, number 5 is Addams Family Values. The Addams Family film was released in 1991, and it was an update of the 1960s TV sitcom, The Addams Family. The plot revolves around a pair of scam artists trying to con the family into thinking their beloved Uncle Fester has come back from being lost at sea, only for it to turn out that he is Uncle Fester, but he had amnesia. The film features a perfect cast. Raul Julia plays Gomez, Angelica Houston plays Morticia, Christopher Lloyd plays Uncle Fester, and Christina Ricci plays the role she was born to play, Wednesday Addams. The film is great, it's so much fun, and it was very well received by fans of the original series. 2 years later, they released a sequel, The Addams Family Values, and it blew the first movie out of the water. Joan Cusack is added to the cast, playing the role of a black widow who is trying to marry and kill Fester for his money, whilst shipping Wednesday and Pugsley off to summer camp, while Gomez and Morticia are getting ready to deal with a new baby, Pubert. It's one of Joan Cusack's best roles. I generally think she's very underrated as an actress. She's not as well known, even though as her brother John Cusack, but you can tell how much fun she's had with this part and that she's really having a good time. It's a film that's impossible to hate. It really is. There's too much glee on the screen to hate it. And it was even nominated for a couple of awards, Oscars and Golden Globes. So even the industry liked this movie. It had the unfortunate luck, however, to come out at the same time as Mrs. Doubtfire, so it didn't really do as financially well at the box office, but has gone on to be a beloved classic family movie. Number 4 is Die Hard with a Vengeance. Die Hard was released in 1988, and it was about Bruce Willis in a tower block trying to stop Alan Rickman being a terrorist. It's a classic movie, and it's a great Christmas film as well. It was followed by Die Hard 2, which was fine. It was enjoyable. Not as good as the first one, but it did have Cole Meany in it. 1995, however, came Die Hard with a Vengeance. Originally based on something else, as all Die Hard films are, at least the good ones. But this time it saw John McClane team up with a reluctant partner, Zeus Carver, played by Samuel L. Jackson, in what was probably a career-defining role for Jackson. He'd previously had a small role in Jurassic Park, and he'd had a lot of other small roles as well. Then he'd had Pulp Fiction the previous year, but Pulp Fiction was more of a niche market, and it didn't quite have the same box office draw as the Die Hard franchise. In fact, it didn't really become a sort of cult classic until a bit later. I know now it's really hard to imagine a time when Samuel L. Jackson wasn't actually all that famous, but when Die Hard with a Vengeance came out, that was pretty much the case. So Jeremy Irons plays a terrorist trying to cause chaos in New York City, and it's up to the team to try and find him and stop him. There's a lot of action, there's a lot of mystery, there's puzzle solving. All in all, it's a great film, and it's actually my favourite of the Die Hard franchise. But did you know there was an alternate ending? An alternate ending to the one shown in the film was actually filmed with Jeremy Irons and Bruce Willis set sometime after the events of New York. And if you have the special edition DVD, you can view it there. It's probably on YouTube. In this version, it is presumed that the robbery succeeds and McClane was used as a scapegoat for everything that went wrong. He's fired from the NYPD after more than 20 years on the force, and the FBI even take away his pension. Nevertheless, he still manages to track down Simon, using the batch number on the bottle of aspirin after they meet in a cafe in Hungary. In this version, Simon has double-crossed most of his accomplices, gotten the loot to a safe hiding place somewhere in Europe, and the gold has been turned into little statuettes of the Empire State Building in order to smuggle it out of the country. But he's still tracked down his foreign hideaway. This version is very similar to Alec Guinness's character in the British heist film The Lavender Hill Mob, made some 45 years previous, in which gold stolen was turned into Eiffel Tower paperweights. McClane is keen to take his problems out on Simon, who he invites to play a game of McClane Says. The original script, which Die Hard with a Vengeance was based on, was actually called Simon Says. This involves a form of Russian roulette with a small Chinese rocket launcher that has the sights removed, meaning that it is impossible to determine which end is which. McClane asks Simon some riddles similar to the ones he played in New York. When Simon gets a riddle wrong, McClane forces him at gunpoint to fire the launcher, which fires the rocket through Simon, killing him. McClane had been wearing a flak jacket, which was the answer to the final riddle, what could have been brought to this meeting to save a life. Even if Simon had pointed the rocket launcher the right way, it is likely that the relatively low-velocity rocket would not have caused McClane enough injury to prevent him from shooting Simon. In the DVD audio commentary, screenwriter Jonathan Hensler claims that this version was dropped because the studio thought it showed a more cruel and menacing side to McClane, a man who killed for revenge rather than in self-defense. The studio was also displeased with the lack of action scenes, feeling that it didn't quite fit as a climax, and therefore chose to reshoot the finale as an actual sequence at a significant cost. Hensler's intention was to show that the events of New York and the subsequent repercussions had tilted McClane psychologically. And this alternative ending set some time after the film's main events would have marked a serious break from the Die Hard formula, in which the plot unfolds over a period of roughly 12 hours. Luckily, I think for us that this ending was withheld, because then we wouldn't have had Die Hard 4.0, which was actually a pretty good sequel. But then we did get Live Free, Good Day to Die Hard, whatever the fifth one was called in America. I have no idea. It was the fifth one here. Number 3 is Fievel Goes West. An American Tale was released in 1986, directed by Don Bluth, the man who made you cry when you were a child. It's the story of a Russian mouse, Fievel Mouskowitz, and his family as they emigrate from Russia to the United States, believing that there are no cats in America and the streets are paved with cheese. Fievel and his sister Tanya, for some reason, have perfect American accents, but there you go. Fievel is separated by his family and has to spend the rest of the movie trying to reunite with him. It's a film I never enjoyed as a child. I found it upsetting deeply, and it's not the reason that you watch a cartoon. The sequel was released in 1991, and it was so much more enjoyable than the first movie. Dissatisfied with their lives in New York, the Mouskowitz family decide that they're going to move out west after a mouse persuades them that the West is a golden opportunity for those wanting a new and better life. However, that mouse was really a puppet controlled by a cat voiced by John Cleese, and he has more sinister plans for the mice who are moving, namely mouse burgers. On the journey, Fievel is separated from his family once again, but this time he reunites with his family much quicker, and it isn't as harrowing to watch. Fievel undergoes a Wild West adventure with his friend the vegetarian cat Tiger, and Wiley Burp, a retired sheriff bloodhound. Dom DeLuise returned to the franchise to voice Tiger, and in his last film role, James Stewart provided the voice of Wiley Burp. For me, the film far surpasses the original because it's fun and it's enjoyable and it has colour, and I'm 100% positive that many people will disagree with me. It's not that I dislike children's films that aren't typically happy, the sort of Disney formula. I mean, Watership Down is still one of my favourite films of all time, and that's far more harrowing. But at the same time, it isn't really a musical, and essentially it's adult characters we're dealing with in Watership Down rather than something such as An American Tale or The Land Before Time, which is all about children going through not just a journey, but a horrific journey while they've been separated from the parents, and that's never really something that's sat with me all that well. Number 2 is Hostel Part 2. Hostel was released in 2005, a film by Eli Roth, and it tells the story of 2 American college students travelling across Europe who find themselves preyed upon by a mysterious group that tortures and kills kidnap victims. It's uncomfortable viewing. The torture scenes are extremely graphic, very realistic, and if you can sit through them, good for you, but I find them completely unbearable to watch. When Hostel 2 was released in 2007, I was going to avoid it altogether. I really hadn't enjoyed the first film. However, a friend of mine got the box set of 1 and 2 and made me watch it. And what I discovered is now one of my favourite films of all time, favourite horror films of all time. Hostel 2 is everything that Hostel should have been. This time, the victims are a group of girls who are lured into Slovakia, the setting of the first film, with the promise of lovely spas and culture rather than the boys' lure of easy girls. This time, however, we get to learn more about the people who are paying for the pleasure of torturing and killing people. The torture scenes are a lot less intense, and that's for the better. They're still uncomfortable, but in an entirely different way to the first film. What makes you squirm is not a boy vomiting all over himself because someone is pushing a power drill through his body. It's a girl who's frightened and crying for a mother. In fact, the classification board had more problems with the particular scene in Hostel 2 because the actress cries and her fear was so realistic and uncomfortable. Rather than the effects of a character being murdered, it was much to Eli Roth's surprise that he actually had to argue the scene should remain in the movie uncut, as the actress shouldn't be penalised for giving a great performance. They were wanting him to cut the scene because the scene was it was a really intense scene. It was really uncomfortable to sit through because the actress was so good, not because the effects made it really gory, but because the actress gives such a terrifying performance. That's why they wanted him to cut that scene, which, in my opinion, that's what makes it the better film. And my number 1 is a film that should come as no surprise to anyone who has ever heard me speak about this movie. It's Grease 2. Now, come on and tell us, Johnny, what's the secret to success? You gotta take a tip from the king of hip, because you know that he's the best. Grease was released in 1978 when John Travolta still had hair. Just about everyone has seen Grease. You know the story. Boy meets girl, they fall in love, they have a summer romance. When school starts again, he spends the year ignoring her until she dresses in something so thin tight she had to be sewn into it. And then they could have a big group musical number at the end and everyone is happy. Don't get me wrong, I like Grease fine. But it's nowhere near as good as Grease 2. And screw anyone who disagrees with me, Grease 2 is the superior film. This time our main star is Maxwell Caulfield, playing the character of Michael Carrington. He starts a new school, Rydell High, and meets Stephanie. She's a pink lady. She's played by Michelle Pfeiffer. She's a tough cookie, and she's not taking any nonsense from the leader of the T-Birds, Johnny Nogarelli. She's just recently broken up with him over the summer, and she doesn't see why should she have to continue to go out with him just because he's a T-Bird and she's a pink lady. So, Michael spends the school year trying to impress Stephanie into going out with him by dressing as a secret badass biker, and Stephanie's rejection of Michael is actually based more on her obsession with the biker, as her and Michael's friendship develops over the course of the year. She's attracted to Michael, but because he's not a T-Bird, she can't go out with him. But at the same time, there's this other biker, and she's really attracted to him, and she doesn't know it's Michael. The songs are better. The characters are better. Not many people in the original Grease film are all that nice to each other. But the characters in Grease 2 are friends. And when some of them, like when one of them does something wrong or inconsiderate, they are called out on it. The T-Birds ride bikes instead of cars, which everyone knows is cooler. And when one of them tries to trick his girlfriend into sleeping with him, she holds fast for the entire movie. Even in the end, when they're doing like the sort of big wrap-up song, she makes him know she's in no way ready for having sex yet, and she's not going to change her mind anytime soon. Like, the T-Birds are portrayed much more as these guys are a little bit buffoons. I mean, they think they're really cool, but they're kind of a bit goofy, and the high school guys, but like, it works for the film. Unlike the original Grease, there's also a running subplot which actually ties the whole film together about the school having a talent show. It keeps pushing everything forward as the film goes on, and it provides the opportunity for more musical numbers. Grease 2 outshines Grease by a mile. It's funnier, it's more entertaining, the songs are better, the characters are nicer. All in all, it's the more superior film. So I'm going to treat you now to a huge sampling of the Grease 2 soundtrack, because as soon as I started writing about Grease 2, I realised I actually didn't have the soundtrack. So I've remedied that. So that was my top 10. If you're catching up on YouTube, then please like and subscribe to this video and our channel. Comments, queries, suggestions, you can email me. It's paulab@ignitionradio.co.uk. You can call the studio on 01642329620 or check out my website. It's airtimeofgeek.xyz. I'm now going to, is treat the right word, treat you to a review of La La Land, which I saw over the weekend. Beware, this review contains spoilers. So I went to see La La Land on Friday with the bestie, and I'm going to review it so you don't have to see it. La La Land has critical acclaim, terrific reviews. It's already started winning awards. So why do I feel like no one else saw the same movie that I did? The movie opens on a truly beautiful and engaging, huge musical number. It's bright, it's colourful, it's a great introduction song for a movie. Shortly following it up is another bright and colourful musical number involving Emma Stone's character and her housemates. Emma plays the character of Mia, a talented, aspiring actress who can't catch a break, though through a chance encounter she meets Ryan Gosling's character, Seb, whose name is only said about halfway through the movie for some reason. Also, like Emma Stone's character, I'm sure her character wasn't named until at least about half an hour, 40 minutes in, and his character definitely wasn't named until the halfway point. Seb is a jazz enthusiast and a professional piano player whose dreams of opening up his own jazz club, the one he wanted to open, was snatched out from under him in ways that are never really explained. After Seb is initially rude to Maya, she sees him at in an 80s synth band playing requests at a party, and this begins their affair. Oh yeah, affair. Mia has a boyfriend who's played by American Horror Story alum Finn Wittrock. She dumps him while they're having dinner with his brother, and she goes to see a movie with Seb. Like, I don't know what was wrong with Finn Wittrock. Some people might think that he's not as handsome as Ryan Gosling. I don't personally see the appeal of Ryan Gosling, but Finn Wittrock, he's pretty, so Don't know what was wrong with him. Anyway, after the meet cute, the musical numbers massively drop off to a point where I think Customs and Excise should be charging this movie for falsely claiming to be a musical and actually being a stealth movie about why jazz is so great and you should never move with the times. After this point, Mia and Seb just start being horrible to each other. Seb encourages Mia to quit her job and write a play to star in, so she writes a one-woman show that she really can't afford to put on. Whilst this is happening, an old friend of Seb's comes to ask him to be the piano player in his jazz band that has a record contract and are about to go on tour. It's a fantastic job for someone who wants to be a professional musician. Recording an album, going on tour, being paid a very decent wage, $1,000 a week, and a cut of the merchandising. However terrible the downside is that the jazz is a little bit more modern and it's updated for a younger audience and people actually want to listen to it. I mean, what a horrible thing. I'm as English can be. I'll say that again. I'm as English can be, but even I know that if you want to play old school jazz, you go and live in New Orleans or Narlands, not Hollywood. If you want money to open a ridiculously huge jazz club that probably doesn't have the audience that it does in Hollywood rather than Narlands, then going on tour and actually making music and money might not be a bad way to go about it. You can earn acclaim, recognition within the industry, and more importantly, money. See, Seb and Mia are both horribly unsupportive to each other about their respective goals. Mia constantly challenges on whether or not this is right for him, despite Seb seeming to actually be having a good time when he was performing and earning decent money. He looked like he was having a hell of a time during the concert. Seb doesn't attend the only night Mia's one-woman play is on because he has to go to a photo shoot. He doesn't even ask the band if they can rearrange it or if he can be late, if they can push it back a little bit or if they can Photoshop him into pictures later. He just goes to the photo shoot and then turns up when the player is over and Mia's devastated. So off the back of this, though, Mia gets herself an audition for a movie and ends up going off to Paris on what would be a good chunk of the year, which you would think would work out fine. I mean, they'd had a bit of an argument before this happened, but he was with the band. He'd signed a contract with the band. He was going to be touring for at least a year. She was going to be doing this movie for a year. But then the movie sort of fades and then comes back 5 years later. So 5 years later skipped by and we found out they've broken up. Mia's married to somebody else with a baby. And Seb has a little jazz club. It's not the one he wanted, but he seems to have accepted that, it's a second, it's a backup. It's still in Hollywood. So Mia stumbles across Seb's club and he imagines what life would have been like if he'd gone to Paris with her. And then it all snaps back to reality and the movie ends. Honestly, after the first 20-25 minutes of fun, I felt this had been it became an entirely different movie, with a different genre, and that I was suddenly tripping balls. There were parts of this movie that I enjoyed, and there were some that were really fun, but it didn't make up for how horrible the characters were. The singing was fine. Neither of them are professional singers, but the movie severely lacked musical numbers. And an hour after the movie ended, I couldn't hum yet anything from the film. And I love me musicals. To me, as an ex-dancer, it was painfully obvious that neither of them are trained dancers. They weren't bad. They'd worked hard. They looked good on screen. Especially Emma Stone's sort of more free-form jazz dancing rather than the more strictly choreographed numbers. But everyone's raving about the dancing. Like, I'm sat in my seat doing an impression of Les from Strictly Ballroom. Legs weren't straight, frames weren't held, arms were sloppy. It just wasn't to a professional standard. Which, it's one of these things that if you've got a sort of any kind of professional background in something, then when you see it in a movie and it's not right, it's going to annoy you. And I did more than a decade of dance training. So when I see dancing in a film, like, I can tell if someone's not a trained dancer. Like, if someone hasn't spent a good chunk of their life doing dancing training, because you can just tell there's certain instincts that you'd have as a dancer that non-dancers wouldn't have. Even if they've had like an intense few months training, it's not the same. Which is why, like, people like Channing Tatum look great on screen dancing, because that guy's had years of training. It's just instinct to him. Whereas, like, when you were watching the movie Magic Mike and you had Alex Pettifer, it wasn't the same, because he's not had years of dance training, and you could just tell. But it's all well and good if it was just a film about an inspiring actress and a jazz musician falling in love. But the film billed itself as a musical. So it begs the question, why didn't they cast actors who can dance and sing? Like, I say that as someone who actually really likes Emma Stone. Really, I like her, like, a quirky look. She's not like a lot of actresses out there who have almost identical features. I mean, she's very pretty, unique looking, and she can act really well when she's not given, like, a script that consists of pure sarcasm. Like, if you give her something different to do, she can act really well. And I was really impressed to find out that Ryan Gosling spent so much time rehearsing the piano that he was actually able to play it for himself without the use of CGI or hand doubles. But again, like, I come back to it, there are a lot of actors out there who can sing and can dance. Like, both of them could sing a bit. But they weren't great. It's maybe it's something that they do for themselves at home, but it didn't seem like either of them had any formal training for any length of time. Again, this comes down to one of these things. If you've ever had some sort of training in something, then you can recognise when someone else hasn't. I could think of at least half a dozen actors who probably could have played those roles a little better than Gosling and Stone. I'm sad to say it's true. The standout performance overall of the movie was given by J.K. Simmons, who did a little head bopping towards the end of the movie, and it was by far the highlight of the entire film. All in all, I was very let down by La La Land. I knew I should have gone to see Monster Trucks instead. I wouldn't recommend the movie. I know that loads of people are raving about it, and I don't know why. I honestly don't know why. I don't know why people are sort of saying, oh, this is a glorious love letter to old Hollywood. Yeah, it is. In the first 20 minutes of the film, it's a love letter to old Hollywood. Like, the first 20 minutes, the really, really big opening musical number, it's beautiful. You know, there's people in all these really bright, colourful costumes and sort of almost sort of 40s, 50s aesthetic in the way hairs have been styled and, like, the cut of costumes and the dance number. And it's really beautiful. And, like, I had such a huge smile on my face while I was watching this opening dance number. I was like, wow, this is fantastic. I'm really enjoying watching this. And then again, the next one, you've got, like, Emma Stone and her housemates who are never introduced, really, and they're dismissed from the film quite quickly. They're all wearing these beautiful dresses, like one's in yellow, one's in red, one's in blue, one's in green, so like you can tell which girl is which. Not that they introduce you to the girls, really. I mean, they are superfluous characters. But, you know, they have this little dance, and it's very much sort of, it is very, like, old Hollywood-esque, with a mix of modern. But that all finishes, like, after they have this little scene in the party where Gosling's, like, in this synth band and Emma Stone requests them to play the song I Ran, and she does this little dance, and it's really quite funny. Like, after this party scene, all the fun falls out the movie. All the fun, and it just becomes a sort of standard film about two horrible people who fall in love with each other. Like, there are, like, some musical numbers, but they're not, like, there's, like, a refrain that Gosling keeps repeating. It's, like, from a jazz record that he plays, and he learns to play it. And he sort of tinkles it out on the piano. And then that refrain sort of forms a song partway through the movie, and then that keeps getting, repeated over and over. Which is fine. But it's not really entertaining. Like, you know, it'd be, if you were like watching any other musical, it'd be that one sort of slow song where you're like, yeah, this is the slow one that they're going for. Maybe that's going to get Best Original Song at the Oscars, that kind of thing. If it was Grease 2, it would be Charades. If it was Grease 1, it'd be that song that Stockard Channing sings when she's on her own and everyone's slut-shaming her for having sex. You know, despite the fact that she's clearly 35. You know, it's like the slow song in the musical, except there's nothing to buffer it with anything magical, really. I mean, it just stops being fun, and it just keeps going on and on about how great jazz is. I mean, I hate jazz. I am not a fan of jazz. There are some jazz songs that I would like, you know, like, like there's a couple of things that someone would go, this is a jazz song, and I could hear it and go, oh, actually, that's not a bad song. But it's not a genre that I would go out my way to listen to. I don't like the improvisational nature, I suppose, of jazz. Maybe I'm a Philistine, but then, you know, I really like nu metal, and I'm sure there are plenty of people who don't like nu metal, who maybe go, oh, right, I like that one Linkin Park song, but they probably wouldn't go out of the way to listen to things like Mushroom Head. So, you know, and what I don't like is the movie is sort of, it's jamming it down your throats that the reason you don't like jazz is that because you've never listened to it. I've listened to plenty of jazz. I used to play music in a brass band. So I was sort of forced on several occasions to go to jazz performances because I played a brass instrument. Still don't like jazz. But whoever wrote the film, I could not be bothered to look it up. Loves it, clearly. Right, so I'm going to get off this rant about La La Land. I'm going to play you a really good song. Actually, I'm going to play you two really good songs. And then we're going to come do our retrospective on The Running Man, which is set this year, 2017. So it's now 2017, which means it's been 30 years since The Running Man was released, and it was set in this current year, 2017. So it's very, very loosely based on the 1982 novel The Running Man, written by Stephen King and published under the pseudonym of Richard Bachman as one of the Bachman books. The story was set in a dystopian United States between 2017 and 2019, and it's about a television show called The Running Man, where convicted criminals runners must escape death at the hands of professional killers. The original director, Andrew Davis, was fired a week into filming and replaced by Glaser. Now, Schwarzenegger has stated that it was a terrible decision, as Glaser shot the movie like it was a television show and lost all the deeper themes. And Schwarzenegger believed this haunted the movie. And prior to Paul Glaser being held as a director, executive producer Rob Cohen had hired 4 other directors in an attempt to make the movie. The first was George P. Cosmatos, who'd impressed Cohen with his work on Rambo First Blood Part 2. How confusing are the Rambo titles, by the way? However, when Cosmatos announced he wanted to relocate the film to a shopping mall, Cohen let him go, feeling that he was trying to take the script in an unacceptable direction. Cohen then offered the project to German director Karl Schenkel? Who knows? Having been impressed with a film of his called Abwärts, but Schenkel turned him down. He didn't feel comfortable with taking on a large project. Next, Cohen hired Ferdinand Fairfax, what an awesome name he has, based on his work on Savage Islands. Like Cosmatos, however, Fairfax began to take the screenplay in a new direction, which Cohen disliked. So once again, he let him go. Davis actually got the project off the ground and into production after he was hired next. But only 8 days into the shoot, he was already $8 million over budget and 4 days behind schedule. Not sure how that can happen. So Cohen let Davis go and ultimately hired Glaser, whom he'd worked with on the first season of Miami Vice. Now, there are specific differences from the book to the film. The novel takes place in 2025. While the film takes place in California, the novel takes place in the northeastern coast of the United States. No surprise, being a Stephen King novel. Tracing Richards from Co-op City, New York to Boston, Maine, Boston, Massachusetts, from Boston to Manchester, in America, which is, I can't remember which state that is, and then from Manchester to Portland, and then to Derry, Maine, which, being Stephen King's hometown, the latter being, Portland, Maine being, Stephen King's hometown, the latter being the fictional primary setting for King's novels It, Dreamcatcher, Insomnia, and Bag of Bones, and then from Derry back to New York. So, Richards, the character, enters the game willingly as opposed to being forced into it in order to acquire some money for his ailing infant daughter. He is deemed an enemy of the state and receives $100 for every hour he stays alive over a period of 30 days, an additional 100 for every law enforcement officer or hunter, not stalker, that he kills, and $1 billion in new dollars, worth far more than the original American dollars. So, as opposed to being confined to the site of an earthquake in California in the film, Richards can travel anywhere in the world to evade the hunters, but must videotape 2 messages per day and courier them to the games network or forfeit his money. Life before YouTube and smartphones. Richards, a Caucasian male, shows signs of racism early on in the novel, but is taken by the Throckmortons, an American, a black American family in Boston, after he is told of the situation the government forces them to live in. Decides to help them, and Laughlin is Caucasian and enters the tournament willingly, as well as Richards. Laughlin eventually meets his end in Topeka, Kansas, where the police burn the shed that he hides in. Dan Killian, called Damon Killian in the movie, is an African American, and Killian is also the producer of Running Man, not the host. Unlike in the film, the only hunter mentioned by name in the novel is Evan McCone, the chief hunter, who is eventually shot dead by Richards. When in Boston, Richards escapes his pursuers by setting fire to a YMCA that he's hiding in and narrowly escapes through a sewer pipe. And the resulting fire kills 5 police officers. And the ending is far more dire in the novel than in a film, unsurprising for a Stephen King work. In Derry, Richard carjacks a woman named Amelia Williams and makes his way to Derry's airport, hijacking a plane, where he also takes McCone hostage. As in the film, Richards is given the chance to become the lead hunter, much to McCone's chagrin, by Killian. Though, unlike in the film, he accepts, and he's later given terrible news that both his wife and daughter have been killed, even before he first appeared on The Running Man, giving him time to ponder the offer more. Feeling he has nothing left to lose, Richard overpowers the flight crew and kills McCone, but is mortally wounded in the process, setting Williams free via parachute. Richard makes a suicide run on the Games building in New York, killing Killian and everyone inside. So that has been our little retrospective on The Running Man. 30 years since it was made, and it was supposedly took place in this year. What a different world 2017 turned out to be. So let's talk about Sherlock before we finish up today. Obviously, spoilers for this season if you've not caught up on season 4. So the final problem aired last night, which was the 3rd episode of season 4. Keep in mind that we'd waited 3 years between episodes of Sherlock. This season is it's been a hot mess. So after last week's shock revelation that there was a missing Holmes sibling, and that sibling was Euros, a sister that Sherlock knew nothing about because he was sat right next to her, didn't even recognise her. The final problem was sort of about things being entirely mental. Do you remember when Sherlock was about adapting Sherlock Holmes stories, but in a modern setting? That was when the show was good. Basically, what it came down to was that Euros was completely evil and killed Sherlock's best friend as a child. Like, she was a child and she killed another child. So she was sent off to live in an insane asylum. And Mycroft decided that he was just going to tell his parents that she'd died so that they could forget about her because he's nice like that. I don't know if the BBC now owes the Crystal Maze some sort of royalty check after Sherlock, Mycroft and John were wandering around in a sort of Crystal Maze-esque escape thing. Euros having taken over the facility that she lives in and for some reason had the glass taken out of her glass cell and had like the signs hung in midair to make it look like she was still in a glass cell, and then for some reason escaped from a cell long enough to become John's therapist, become the woman he was having an affair with, and impersonate a celebrity's daughter, and then went back to the mental facility. I don't know why she did this. I don't know. It's not like it's easy to get to. It's on an island. Like, you have to get to it by helicopter. Speaking of which, someone did arrive by helicopter, though it was a flashback. Moriarty. Now, I don't like the Moriarty in the show. I'm sure the actor's a fine actor. I'm sure he's a lovely person. I just don't like him. I think it's miscasting. I don't think he plays the part very well. I don't get why people like the character so much. All he basically does is sort of flounce around the screen and talks in a loud voice sometimes. So I don't get what the general appeal of the character is, but the character's definitely dead, which is good because they've brought him back from the dead after shooting himself in the face. I would have lost my stuff. I really would have, because it would have just been so stupid. Like, the final problem isn't like the most self-satisfied episode of Sherlock. I mean, that's still when John and Mary got married and Sherlock spent the entire episode pottering around in his mind palace. But at least in that episode, he was solving a crime. In this episode, he wasn't, and it was stupid. Like, of the 3 episodes to air this year, 2 of them began with, like, explanations of plot holes from the previous episode. Like, when Sherlock shot Charles Magnuson in the face at the end of his last vow, and the Six Thatchers opened with the characters literally editing the murder out of history. And then, like, when Euros shot John Watson in the face with a gun last week in The Lying Detective, like, it wasn't even a cliffhanger, because immediately after, the BBC showed a trailer for the next episode, and the terrible CGI fire explosion-y thing showed that John probably didn't get shot in the face, and half a line of dialogue mentions that it was just a tranquilizer. Ho, never mind. Like, the thing that really, really, really annoyed me was the underuse of Molly this season. Being that Molly is probably my favourite character in this show, like, apart from Sherlock, because she's an original invention for the show, and she's a really well written character, except for the last 2 seasons where they've not known what to do with her because Sherlock's not been solving crimes. Like, Molly's just sort of turned up to be abused, and again they've done it again. Like, Molly is clearly so distressed at Sherlock making her say "I love you" and him saying "I love you," but completely not meaning it. It's awful. Molly Hooper deserves better than this. I don't know why they got away with a fiance when last season they introduced in one episode that Molly had moved on. She's got a fiance. In the next episode, they've broken up, and I'm a I'm a Sherlolly shipper. And I like Molly and Sherlock. I like that idea. But I thought, oh, right, so they've broken Molly up with a fiancé. Maybe there's a reason for that. Turns out there wasn't. Turns out they just like making Molly's life awful, which is not a reason to keep a character around. Like, on the plus side, Moriarty's definitely dead. And if there's another episode, hopefully he'll never be mentioned again. Like, they've said pretty much categorically that there's probably not going to be another series of Sherlock. There might be a special, but I doubt there's going to be another series of Sherlock. Benedict Cumberbatch, thanks to Sherlock, is now a huge star. And Martin Freeman's probably working more now than he ever has previously in his career. Not that he wasn't famous, but now he's getting a lot. And again, it's both because of Sherlock that this has happened, but now they don't have time to do the show. And, Moffat stepping down as showrunner on Doctor Who, so he's not got an excuse. So it literally is because of Freeman and Cumberbatch that it's not continuing. I was also sort of like, oh God, what I really, really hate about this guy who plays, like, Moriarty is that he's like an understudy who's just been told he's going to play the main part in the play that he's in. So he's decided he's going to do it in the most memorable way that he can. But unfortunately, the most memorable way that he can is so over the top, it's absolutely ridiculous. Like, Moffat and Gatiss have claimed that now that their Sherlock Holmes has reached the point where he can be compared to Sherlocks of television past. He's tested and broken and humanised so thoroughly that now he bears little resemblance to the sexy young swishy-coated alien from the pilot. He knows Lestrade's first name, he's helping to raise Watson's baby, he's a wise old mastermind with a functioning set of emotions, and now he can stand shoulder to shoulder with Peter Cushing or Basil Rathbone. And if that's the case, good. Because Sherlock sorely needs a snapback into recognisable shape. I want to go back to the swishy coats. Because it was fun and it was a detective show. I've read every single Sherlock Holmes story. There's 104 short stories, 4 novels. I've read them all, and I love them. They're great stories, and Sherlock is a bit of a knob in the stories. And that's fine. And the detective stories are fun. That's what they are, the detective stories. I like having all the little relationshipy stuff and all the little side characters. Like, the standout moment of last night's episode was Mrs. Hudson dancing to 666, the Order of the Beast, while she was doing the hoovering. Like, that was the best part of the entire episode. But it's getting swept under the carpet, really, because the rest of the episode was so terrible. Like, and I say this as a fan. Like, I am a huge fan of the show, and I just feel it's not doing its best. It needs to be a detective show, otherwise what's the point? Like, if Sherlock Holmes isn't solving crimes, what's the point of Sherlock Holmes? That's basically what I'm saying. You might disagree with me. If you disagree, write in. You can send me an email. You could call the studio. The number's 01642 329 620. You could email in the numbers 01642. Yes, no, that's the studio number. You can email me. It's paulab@ignitionradio.co.uk. You could get in touch via the website. You can do it any number of ways. I am going to sign off for this week. That's everything from me from this week. Next week, more top 10s, more reviews, possibly another retrospective. There's other things turning 30 this year. Sadly, I already have.